Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Andrew, and we are the IB English guys. And today we're going to talk about my colleague, Mr. Giles' favorite topic, poetry.
Yeah.
Mr. Giles, let's give our viewers a quick preview of what we're going to do today.
Well, first we're going to talk about why we love poetry so much, and then we're going to talk about how reading poetry is similar to a drafting process in writing.
Fantastic. After that, we want to give you a simple acronym that will help you break down and analyze and understand poetry. And after that, we're going to get to hear a poem from Maya Angelou that I think you're going to love.
That's great.
And finally?
And finally, we're going to analyze that poem using our acronym and just break that down and deconstruct the poem and talk about how it's so beautiful.
Mr. Giles, can you give us some inspiration before we get into today's poem?
I've got a quote for us to sort of anchor us, and I think it connects to the poem and it connects to poetry. It's from a British novelist named Kate Moss, and it goes, "When all else is done, only words remain, words endure."
Words endure. That's right. We're here for a short period of time, Mr. Giles, but when we're gone, our words will be here forever. I like that. Very nice.
And our poet Maya Angelou passed away a little while, and her poetry continues to inspire us. She's a great poet. Okay, so today's about how to read a poem, and the way we like to talk about reading a poem is this idea of reading a poem with several drafts. You cannot read a poem the first time and read it on first glance and really do it justice. So you want to think of it in different drafts. What do we do in the first draft, the first time we read a poem?
Mr. Giles, the first time you read a poem, please put your pen down. Can we say that?
We can say that.
I refuse to let my students hold a pen on the first draft. Just read the poem aloud if possible, okay? And just hear the words, hear yourself speak, and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, and just get into that. Yeah, exactly. Get your first impression of the poem. Then you want to think about unfamiliar words, perhaps, and say, well, are there some words that I don't understand?
Yeah, and that's time to pick up your pen and maybe do a little research if you have that ability to do so and figure out what those unknown words are, okay?
The second draft, I do want to pick up my pen now, and I want to read it a second time and read it again slowly. And we want to read it slowly, and we want to really think about ideas. Now, many times lines of poetry will continue to the next lines. We want to think about lines that are grouped together, perhaps in a single sentence. We want to look at end stops, and we want to think about the ideas of the poem and how they progress.
Yeah, I have my students write down those big ideas in the margins, and then the last step on the third reading, Mr. Giles, your third draft, then once you have some ideas and some understanding about what the poem is about, then you can go look for poetic features, but not before.
Yeah, and that's when you can start to pick up maybe different colored pencils or highlighters, and you can start to look for some of the different features and hopefully apply this acronym that we have. I want to give props to one of my colleagues, Jenny Young, who gave me this handout a long time ago, and it's a really helpful acronym. You might have an acronym of your own that your teacher's given you, but the idea behind this is just these are the different components of poetry. We're going to link a glossary of poetic features that our colleague Lisa gave us that's amazing, and it's got all kinds of poetic techniques and their meanings. I'm sure your teacher's given you those. We need the techniques of poetry to be able to talk about poetry.
Definitely. Let's dive into SPEC FILMS, Mr. Giles, and think about what each letter of this acronym stands for.
Yeah.
The S of SPEC FILMS, Mr. Giles.
Yeah, the subject of the poem and the speaker of the poem. This is our starting place. We want to think about what's the topic of this poem and who's speaking and what can I say about them.
Yeah, and the P would be your purpose. That's another way of saying the theme. You know, what is the deep meaning, the intent of the poet, and what is it they're trying to communicate in terms of message?
Yeah, and the E is emotion, and it might be emotions plural. What are the different emotions that we see or feel in this poem, and how can we interpret that? How do we feel, but also how does the speaker feel?
Yeah,
and that's again very important. That's talking about tone.
The C stands for craft, and then the craft can be further broken into other components. Mr. Giles, can we talk about C for craft? That involves techniques, correct?
Yeah, craft is techniques, and that's really thinking about the author's choices. And films are all the different techniques, and they're categorized. The F in films is figurative language. This is what I always say is where you can really make your money with poetic analysis. So we're thinking about the metaphors, the similes, the symbols, personification, allusions. These are all the sort of figurative techniques that poets use.
And one figurative technique that sort of gets its own letter is the I for imagery. Of course, we have 5 different types of imagery. You know that. This is time to really look for those and try to find those and talk about how they support the main message.
Yeah, great. And L is language. This is where we're thinking about specific word choice, and we're looking at maybe a lexical field, or we're looking at particular diction and word choice. We're thinking about connotations of words. and then really kind of trying to unpack a few of the key sort of significant words of the poem in the language.
Yeah, the M stands for music, or sort of the sound, the rhythm of the actual poem itself. This might be a time to listen for plosives. You want to look for assonance, consonants, those sound devices that really make the poem jump out and give it a sort of a musical feel.
Yeah, the S is structure. I really like to talk about structure when you look at a poem. Is it written in free verse, which is unrhymed, unstructured poetry? Is it written, does it have enjambment? Does one line lead to the next? Could we talk a little bit about the structure of the different stanzas and the significance of that? So there's lots of things we can look at structurally that are really impactful.
Mr. Giles, what do you say we take a crack at this? Should we look at a poem from Ms. Maya Angelou and talk about how SPEC films can be applied to her work?
That sounds great. So let's read it aloud first, and then we're just going to do a quick run through of SPEC films and give you an idea of what this looks like.
So this is round one, no pens. Do you have a pen?
Don't have a pen.
No pens. All right,
Okay.
Giles.
All right. I Love the Look of Words by Maya Angelou. Popcorn leaps, popping from the floor of a hot black skillet and into my mouth. Black words leap, snapping from the white page, rushing into my eyes, sliding into my brain, which gobbles them the way tongue and teeth chomp the buttered popcorn. When I've stopped reading, ideas from the words stay stuck in my mind like the sweet smell of butter perfuming my fingers long after the popcorn is finished. I love the book and the look of words, the weight of ideas that popped into my mind. I love the tracks of new thinking in my mind.
Thank you, Ms. Angelou, and of course, Mr. Giles, for the read.
Yeah, it's a great poem, and I think it's a poem that is a poem about poetry. And again, it's really about the power of words and what words do for the speaker and what words do for us.
Yeah,
so we like this.
Okay, Mr. Giles, let's take SPEC films and apply it to that Maya Angelou poem, okay? So we know the S stands for subject and speaker. What can you say about that, Mr. Giles?
Well, the subject of the poem is poetry itself and words and their impact on us as readers and what they do for us and how they can uplift us and linger in our minds.
It's sort of a meta poem. It's a poem about a poem.
Yeah, it is a meta poem. Great word, meta poetry. It is
meta poetry, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The speaker, just really quickly, the speaker, I can say that the speaker is a lover of words. She's a logophile or a bibliophile. And again, I think that's something we can get right away. We get that first person speaker's perspective.
Yeah,
very important.
Very nice. All right, we've got the speaker and the subject. The P is the purpose. What do you think the purpose of this poem is, Mr. Giles?
Yeah, the purpose is again to celebrate words and to ponder the effect of words on us as human beings.
Yeah, and that idea that, once we're gone, the words will still linger, right?
Words endure. Just
Words
like the
endure.
quote. See?
This guy, he's got a
We're
good
connected.
lesson.
Okay.
Amazing. The E stands for emotions. Can you talk about the emotions that are in this poem?
I think it's celebratory. I think it's also reflective. And I like tone words because I think it's, again, more than one thing, but it's to me, that's what it is.
Yeah, and folks, when you want to describe tone, we've got a handout down there. Check those words out for mood and tone. I think they'll be really helpful for you.
If he remembers to put the handout on there, that's important. But he will.
I remember.
Yeah,
okay. The C, now we're getting into the author's craft, the author's choices. And we can break that down into further categories. The films part. The F stands for figurative language. What leaps at you, Mr. Giles?
I think it's the extended metaphor comparing popcorn with words. We see that throughout the entire poem, that it's basically comparing popcorn and words and the effect on the reader's mind. I think that's really important. I might also want to talk about the contrasts, the sort of light and dark, the white and black contrast, about like words on the white page and the significance of that, and connecting to the white popcorn, and I think that's interesting. There's also, Maya Angelou is a black poet and the sort of power of being a black voice. I might want to talk about that metaphorically. So and also just the weight of words and that being kind of a metaphorical thing. So there's a lot of figurative things I can talk about.
We like metaphors, we like similes, the extended metaphors. You can bank a lot of points when you hit those key aspects, those key authorial choices. Okay, moving on, we have the I for imagery. I was going to get there.
Okay.
The I for imagery. Talk to us about some of the imagery you see in here.
Yeah, and imagery is things that we can see and hear and taste. And again, there's all types of imagery. We can see the popcorn leaping into her mouth. We can sort of almost hear the popcorn that's snapping from the white page. I think again that visual imagery. But then again, we have that sort of that taste of the popcorn. That's like gustatory imagery of the buttered popcorn.
Not to be confused with olfactory imagery.
Yeah.
We like these imageries.
And we
right?
have smell. So again, it's just this whole sensory experience of the popcorn, but again, that's all connected to words. It's pretty beautiful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, that takes us to the
L, words.
words and language. All right, she's got some pretty interesting choices of words in here, Giles. What's popping at you?
Well, it's funny
No.
you said popping because I love the verbs. I love the word gobble because again, gobbling, we gobble popcorn when we're really hungry. But again, it's the sort of gobbling words and gobbling poetry that the reader's doing.
Rushing for the poetry, chomping on the popcorn like I chomp at poetry. It's
And
fantastic use of
popping
words.
into my mind. It's really, it's I don't know. It's a very
It's an energetic. You're right. It's very celebratory and it's energizing. I want to
Yeah.
write poetry when I read this. Right.
Okay, that's great. Then
Now-
we have M, the musicality of the poem.
Yeah. Talk to me about some of the sound devices you see in here.
Yeah, I think
Or
like
here in here. Excuse me.
Right. Well, I see several times that we have really interesting, there's interesting alliteration like tongue and teeth and this, how that creates a pleasing effect. And also even the internal rhyme. One of my favorite lines of the poem is, I love the book and the look of worms, and book and look, and that internal rhyme within that line of poetry is really interesting and really powerful.
Yeah, I really enjoy the plosas with the popcorn and the popping. I just think there's this poem has a lot of punch to it. I think the plosas really give it some strength behind the
That's good.
enthusiasm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, structure, Mr. Giles. Take us through the structure. What do you see and talk to me about that choice?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I'm struck by, and I had to think about this for a while, is the two stanzas, and why is this divided into two stanzas? And I got to thinking about it, and it's basically the sort of reading experience, and then it's the after reading experience. Or it's the eating popcorn experience and the after eating popcorn experience. It's like the way words linger, they endure, and they stay in our mind, and they ignite our curiosity. So we have a reading. So I thought that was interesting structurally.
That is nice. I read the book, I love it, then I put the book down. Oh man, that was a great book. I eat the popcorn, I get rid of the popcorn. Man, that was good popcorn. It's sort of that feeling.
Yeah, I could also talk about the enjambment and the way the enjambment is inviting us to look at certain words. The word skillet stands out, the word mouth stands out, leap. So it's interesting. Enjambment helps to sort of emphasize the words at the end of the lines. That would be something to talk about structurally. So again, that's an interesting aspect to talk about.
Yeah, I think overall the point here is to choose a poem that's not overly complex, but to show how a simple acronym can really help us destroy and really deconstruct a poem and extract the most we can out of it, okay?
That's right. So we hope that this gets you interested in poetry, but also gives you a good sort of tool that you can apply to any piece of poetry. And maybe this is a way for you to go forward and read some poetry yourself that you find interesting and apply some of those strategies.
Okay, that concludes our video, but before we go, just one more quick review of SPEC Films. The S is
Speaker and subject.
P is purpose or message.
The E is emotion and tone.
C is craft, which can be subdivided into.
F is figurative language.
I is imagery.
And L is language.
M is music or sound devices.
And S is structure.
That's SPEC Films, folks, and that's the end of our video. We hope you found this information helpful. We hope you found it valuable, and we hope you keep coming back because we will show you how to have success in your IB studies. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.
Words endure.